As someone who has over 6 years of playing time, I've seen my fair share of meta changes and meta commanders. But in all those years, there's been one constant, one force of nature that has been able not only survive, but to dominate. And of course, when you think about the most iconic, I think everyone has only one thought that comes to mind. And that is the scourge of God himself, Attila. So Attila, for me, and I think for most people, is definitely the most iconic, especially if you look at it from all the history he has made ever since he got into the game. So today's video is going to be a bit different than my usual ones. Almost feels like an essay about the commander because I've been able to witness him, but not actually use him, which, you know, as a free-to-play at the time, it was kind of difficult to get both commanders max, because to make the most of Attila at the time, you have Takeda as well, which is basically a cheerleader for the main event. And compared to Attila, Takeda aged quite poorly, basically having zero purpose outside of the pairing and not the ideal investment to work on right now or even in the past couple of years. So Attila, when he arrived, which was back probably like 2021 maybe, I didn't lock him right away, but I remember because it was all about the skill damage, and when people read about him and his skills, people thought he was trash because, you know, where's the skill damage? There's nothing here. How is it gonna work? And right when we got the commander and we did some, you know, you saw some reports flying around with the Takeda. Then you saw the amount of destruction he inflicted during like cities, flags, forts, you name it. Because at the time there was simply no counter to him. I think the best like garrison at the time was something like Charles with Vuzetian or something like that, or Constantine. So it did not work to tame this dude. Like it wasn't a meta. I just remember it from my old playing days in my alliance. Like the only way to beat Attila Takeda was to have more Attila Takedas, you know. It was simply too hard to swarm it down. You had no adequate skill damage because, you know, later on with the new release commanders, the damage factors got higher and higher, which means there was more burst and means you couldn't have Attila ramp up his damage, which is what he actually needs. Attila is a ramp up commander. The more you let him cook, the more he'll cook, you know. Sounds obvious, but in most commanders, like the burst commanders, like for example the other cavalry commanders like Nevsky, Justinian, they rely on burst damage. So they were able to quickly, you know, finish the objective, but didn't have the necessary amount of normal damage to inflict too many sev wounds. So before you try to do a high skill damage rally to get the hospital full, then you launch Attila Takeda rally and just let it cook. And the longer it goes, the better the report is gonna get. And if I scroll down, I scroll down my memory lane. But of course, every time you favorite a recent report, the oldest one gets replaced. So this took quite some scrolling, but I'll show you some reports. You know, just the basic ones. You can see Attila Takeda. I think this was a flag. And if you look at the sevs, look at it. Disgusting. Attila Takeda against that current meta, I don't know which year it is, but this is not just one example. This is a city. Even to this day, you can get these type of reports, and you can see it just keeps going on and on. Obviously, you have the infantry version of Attila Takeda, but it's not quite the same. I don't think it's similar, but not the same thing at all. And this is just disgusting. Like, I don't even know how this garrison came to be, but this is probably the worst garrison I've ever seen in a city rally. Let me know if you've seen worse in the comments, but I don't think I've seen any worse. And just, you know, having this garrison against Attila Takeda is just free KP. Like, the freest of KP you can ever have. And obviously, yeah, Charles Ethel, nothing crazy about it. But I think the first real counter to it was with the release of Zenobia. I remember when Attila released, he ran rampant for months. You could not stop him, and until Zenobia couldn't come quick enough because she was the only one that could stop him, because she had a lot of normal damage stats that mitigate the normal damage, but also have a lot of healing that will able to sustain and keep the garrison alive. So for that reason, Zenobia with YSS at the time was certainly the best counter you could have for Attila, and this actually worked. I think Xeno YSS, and then later on like something like Xeno Flavius, Xeno, which was also another commander. Xeno was so long in the meta, and even in some cases you could still use her in some garrisons. It's not the most optimal, but it's, you know, you can use it. But at the time, Attila was kind of silenced, you know. But with the release of Archer Garrison later down the road, he got resurrected when Nevsky came around. So this was another pairing that was able to do a lot of damage. And I think the garrison at the time was something like Dido Zug, and you used Nevsky with Attila primary, Nevsky secondary, because you know it had a lot of burst, it had a lot of counterattack, like swarm, not swarmable. Obviously, it's not ideal because you do reduce the skill damage of Nevsky, but with Nevsky's expertise, you amplify Attila and also make the whole lineup tankier. So in a rally context, if you kept it full, and if people swarmed you, maybe even better, you were able to inflict a lot of saves, and people were just running it in order to get swarmers down and obviously soften up the objective so you can swarm it down with your own marches. And I think it worked quite well. But it got out of favor when Justinian was around, so Justinian was probably like the better pick for these type of situations. And ever since then, he was kind of like mostly in the artifact KVKs type of roles. He was also quite the significant figure in the Gorgo Attila or Attila Gorgo Garrisons artifact, which we've seen plenty of reports about, and you just see how versatile he is. And I think for the few people, well, not few, but for the people who still play since he got released and they got him maxed, I think it's the best commander value you will ever have, because it's been 5 years and he's still not just there but dominant with this new Delta pairing or Arch pairing with Subutai. You already seen reports, you already see the testings. I posted some simulation testings 2 months ago, and I saw it like Attila Subutai is just going to conquer everything on the field, and it happens to be the case. Now, would you run Arch or Delta is honestly still debatable, but you just can't go wrong. And it just made me think about how many commanders are actually been able to do this. I don't think there has been any commander that has been as ever versatile, and also the long investment made. I think the only commander that only comes close is maybe Guan, but Guan, even despite the release, Ragnar is still being used, and some cases think he's not even better than Guan. So in some cases, people still prefer him, but he's not been prevalent in other scenarios. Guan has never been a rally commander, and he's definitely never been a garrison commander. So same commander cycle, but different roles, but still the same longevity, I would say, but not the same level of use. So for that point, I think Attila is definitely the commander that I have honestly haven't worked on, because at the time, like I said, it's been, you know, not easy to get a lot of universal sculptures. And down the line, when I was kind of wanted to work on him, he was getting not as good on open field, because with the release of new commanders, the burst got higher, and in the open field, you couldn't get the reports you would have get before you had all these kill damage commanders. So in the open field, he definitely struggled, but maybe like maybe 2 years after that. So you definitely had 2 years of running rampant and just brutally inflicting saves on everyone, especially in like altar fights. I remember in altar fights, if you had a Attila Takeda, you were just golden. You just send it out, you know, just micro a little bit. But if you get swarmed, it's okay. You kind of want to be swarmed because it amplifies everything you have in your kit. And it just made me jealous of other people, because how were you able to do this and just have this lazy march, you know, quote unquote lazy, but it still required some finesse to get the most reports you could have got. And I'm just curious, man. I'm sharing my thoughts on this commander, and it's insane how relevant he is and how relevant he has become in this past year. 4 years since his release, maybe 5. So for me, that is insanity. It's probably the most broken commander we have ever seen in Rise of Kingdoms, and I think he will be. I think he won't be beat in this category. So I just wanted to share some thoughts on him as someone who has watched his destruction but never actually done it myself. You know, I expressed some jealousy, but you know, at the same time, I had my limitations, I would say, because at the time when he released, the only real requirement to having like a meta march was having the sculptures to max the commander, but also having like a relevant VIP level. There was no equipment, no armaments, no tech, even like no crystal tech, and even then you could still have a big performance. And you know, Kingdoms won because they had more Attila-Takedas in the field, in the rallies. So it was definitely a weird time, and it's definitely a nostalgic time now that I can think about it. But you know, just sharing some thoughts on him. And what do you guys think? Is he the most iconic commander in the game? I certainly think so. And with all that said, I'll catch you guys in the next one.